This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas, and here's our beginner project. I'm going to start knitting on the standard gauge machine for this video, video number 3, and I'm just showing first where I have printed off the pattern and I've hit the size I'm planning to knit. You see there are 6 sizes in this pattern. I've highlighted the size I'm planning to knit so that I can read it much more easily, and I recommend that you do that. The pattern will be available on the blog. To begin with some information from the pattern, this is on the standard gauge knitting machine. It uses Baby Bee yarn. It requires for the smallest sizes 2 balls and for the largest 4 balls. The tension is tension 8, or the tension to get the gauge. Gauge was covered in the previous video. And for the back and front, there's a mock ribbing, which is 2 tensions tighter than the tension 8, or whatever tension you used for your yarn. And I'm going to begin with the back. I begin with this instruction: cast on for a 2x1 mock ribbing over 82 needles. To do a mock ribbing over 82 needles, I'm going to cast on to needle 41 on the right and needle 41 on the left. So I divide my number of needles required by 2 to figure out what needles to cast on over. This is the needle arrangement for 2x1 mock ribbing. 2 needles in use, 1 needle back and out of work. I have threaded the machine with contrasting waste yarn and knitted 1 row, and now I'm going to hang a comb. I've got the comb on and a claw weight at each end, and I'm going to knit about 8 rows with the waste yarn. The hem is 10 rows deep, so I must knit double that length. I'm taking the garment yarn, I'm threading the machine, which I have on tension 6, which is 2 tensions tighter than my main tension. And I'm going to knit 20 rows to make a 10 row deep hem. After the 20 rows, I need to pick up the edge. I removed the weight and the comb, I zoomed in close, and I'm going to begin picking up. And what I do is I fold this, and I get the first stitch, but I put it on the second needle. Then the longer stitch is going to go on the empty needle, which I pull into work. So I pick up 2, and then I must skip 1. So I skip the needle, and I go on the next left needle in a pair of 2, and then I reach back and pick up an empty needle with the next stitch. So I'm going to skip 1 and pick up 2 on across. Here it is with the waste yarn removed so that you can see it a little bit better. And that's going to be the bottom edge of the back. Row counter to 0, so I change that. I adjust to the garment tension, which in my case was 8, in your case is whatever tension you needed to use to get gauge with your machine and your yarn, and then you knit the number of rows that it says in the pattern to knit to get up to the armhole. I've knitted the number of stitches, the number of rows that the pattern says to knit before the raglan shaping, and then the next instruction is to bind off some stitches at the beginning of each of the next 2 rows. So I'm going to bind off 4 at the end of this row because my pattern says to do 4 for the size I'm doing. I happen to be knitting the smallest size. This is the chain edge transfer tool bind off that I showed in an early lesson, and it's very helpful to have a weight under the edge. And I've put the second stitch on the first needle, and then I move them both over. I'm going to do that again. And then I knit through. So that's 2 bound off. The instructions tell me for my size to bind off 4. That is 3 bound off. And then I just look at my needle numbers and make sure that I have bound off the instructed number. Then I knit to the other side. Once I'm at the other side, I'm going to bind off stitches at the other end. So, because the instructions were to do a bind off at each of the next 2 rows at the beginning. You can really only bind off several stitches at the carriage side, so that's why you can't bind it off on both sides at the same time. And again, I'm going to hang a weight over here on the edge. So I've bound off one. Now I'm going to bind off the second one. The second stitch on the first needle. Then I transfer them both over, and then I knit through them. So that's 2 bound off. Second stitch to the first needle. Then I transfer them both on over, and I can feel the yarn splitting. I don't want it to, so I'm closing that latch manually. Not sure why it's splitting. I'm just going to try again until I get it to not split. There, I got it that time. And knit it through. That's 3 bound off. One more. Well, I'm catching on quickly that the yarn likes to split, so it's very valuable for me to go ahead and close the latch as I push it in. So that was decreasing 4 at the beginning of each of the next 2 rows. Now my instructions are to knit 4 rows. And then I'm going to do a double decrease on both ends, here and here. I do that by getting a 3-prong transfer tool. So it's this transfer tool that has the 3 prongs. I pick up 3 stitches and I push straight back in. I move over by 2 needles, and I need to pick it up so that there's 2 stitches on this one, and 2 stitches are going to go on this needle, and then this last one will only have 1 stitch on it. And I just make sure that I don't have any empty needles out after I've done that. That decreased on that side by 2 stitches. So I take the triple transfer tool and hang it on the 3 needles, pull all the way out, push all the way in, and get the stitches on the tool, and then I go over 1, 2 spots. Oops, I've gone over 1 too many. Okay, 2 spots, and I'm going to bring out a needle because I had pushed that all the way back, and I put it on like that. So I have 2, 2, and then the last needle has 1 stitch. Now, my instructions are to proceed like this. I'm going to knit 4 rows and do a double decrease for a certain number of times. So I'll stop the video and I'll come back when that is done. Finish the back by repeating these double decreases at each side, and then you're going to take the back off of the knitting machine by doing several rows of waste yarn. This is the sweater back. I've turned it around right side facing. This is what one side of raglan decreases look like. It's curling, but it's going to be blocked lightly. And then I'm unrolling the other side, and here's what the other side looks like. So we have a big slant that matches left and right, and then lifting it on up, here is the mock rib hem. One more thing about the mock rib hem. Before I put away the back, I'm threading a knitting needle into this mock rib hem, all the way across, trying to get right inside the tunnel. And then I'm going to hold this sturdy old metal knitting needle and I pull this down like this. And you'll see quite a noticeable improvement in how that mock rib looks. So that's what you do before you set the knitting aside to rest.